All right, so you got a story. What's your favorite story, do you think?
My favorite bombing story it was actually my birthday. I was about a year or two into comedy, and I was doing a gig in Daytona Beach. It was like a 2-day run, and the first night was in a bowling alley in Orlando, like the outskirts of Orlando. And if you didn't get a big laugh, you could hear someone get a strike.
Right.
So you'd bomb and just hear someone like, you'd be like,
Right.
okay, well, that gig was fun.
Hey, Jerry, it's league night,
Yeah, and there was 2 shows, and they had a buffet, and I remember people wouldn't leave because they wanted to stay at the buffet. So I'm just doing the same act, and this guy's literally yelling out, like, I heard these. And I was like, well, you stayed, so of course you heard these.
You're not supposed to be here.
That's not the bad gig. That gig, in retrospect, great. So then the next night, we go to Daytona, and every comic is telling me, everybody I talked to who had done this gig was like, that night, it's going to be rough. I get there, it's the night of my birthday, and I check into the hotel that they put me up in, and they gave me it was called the Lover's Suite.
Okay.
So it's like a heart-shaped bathtub. I'm completely alone.
Right.
Just in Daytona. I'm just
that really just drives it in more that you're alone. When there's rose petals on the bed, and you're like, I have to go to sleep.
You're like, hold on, I have to go bomb in a bar. I'll be back to sleep on this rose petal bed alone. So I go to the bar. The first sign something bad is going to happen is the Uber driver won't drop me off. He drops me off next door. He's like, I don't want to go in that parking lot. It's this big, they have an outdoor, like a back with this big, huge open patio. And then inside it's like a biker bar. So I walk in, I'm trying to find anybody related to the show. I'm emailing the people who booked me. They're like, you'll figure it out. Just no information.
Right.
I go to the guy who is the bartender and I go, hey, I'm here to do the comedy show. And he's not into it. He's not excited. He was like, ugh. So he goes, all right, we're going to start in 20 minutes. I'm doing 30. And I think the headliner's doing an hour, or one of those shows where you're just like, none of these times make sense. So I'm going up, and I go up and I go, are we going to start the show? And the guy's like, sure. So it cut the music. The same angry bartender walks up, and he grabs the mic and he goes, hey, shut up. Just screams at the bar. Everybody looks at him, and he just holds the mic out to me. Like, just take it. So I come up and I'm like, hey, how we doing? We got a show. And then I just bombed for 30 minutes. Just never got them. No subjects. Just trying to riff. And they're like, we don't recognize you as a human being. At one point, a loose pit bull comes into the room. And I was like, is that anyone's pit bull? And some guy just yells at, he's like, no, he's always here. Like it was the bar dog. And I was like, I don't have a problem with the loose dog, but it's a pit bull. And everyone's just like, shut up. Just get back to your stupid jokes. So I'm like, okay. I bomb horribly. It's an absolute nightmare. No, there's no light. I just eventually I look at my watch. I'm like, all right, it's been 30 minutes.
Right.
I go, let's get your headliner up here. The headliner comes up and immediately just starts roasting everybody in the crowd. Kind of gets him, to be honest. He did a lot better than I did. And my favorite part was I'm sitting there just so embarrassed and depressed at the bar, and a blind guy walks through being led by another person. So someone's holding his arm and walking him through. And he's got a cane or whatever, a little walking stick. And the headliner sees it and he goes, no shit, Gandalf the Grey, and just does this incredible riff about how this blind guy is Gandalf, and he's banging the mic stand like it's Gandalf's staff. And everyone is laughing so hard at the blind guy. Just the meanest laughter I've ever seen.
Woo, boy.
It was one of those great moments where you realize, if you do comedy in a city or a club and you start bashing a blind guy, it's probably not going to go well.
Right.
But there are still pockets of the country where if you do that, it's a killer bit.
It's a killer bit, and it really shows you the audience that you're playing to. Now it makes sense that your jokes didn't do well because
no blind stuff.
No blind stuff. Right.
It was a very eye-opening experience to be like, oh, I'm going to have to learn how to get these people. Because I was very early on in comedy.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not going to tailor my act to these people, but I am going to have to learn how to handle this. But that night was a rough bomb.
And then not only that, then you have to like go back to your hotel. You know,
Oh, the best part of the
just
story.
end. You're still alone with this
Oh
horrible
yeah,
feeling.
I'm alone in the lover's suite. But that's my favorite part of the story. The thing that really sets this over the edge is I go, you bomb and you're just like, you just sit outside and you're like, I don't want to talk to anybody. The
Right?
worst thing can happen is like someone comes over and is like, I believe in you. I know
Yeah.
you sucked in there, but so I'm sitting there and it's a biker bar and there's a sign as you go in. And I didn't see this because I went in the back the first time. So now I'm sitting up front. There's a sign that says, no guns, no drugs, no colors, like biker colors. But I'm just sitting there, and this hammer guy walks up, and he points at the sign, and he goes, "Unbelievable!" In 2018, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "What do you think that last thing is
Right.
referring to?"
Yeah.
And I think the guy thought it was like the most racist sign possible, which is
Right.
just a great moment for me.
It was like the first two were pretty progressive, and it was
Yeah.
like no guns. Hey, say no to drugs, man, and then also get out of here.
I love that he thinks they would post a sign that is using like antiquated racial terminology and he's upset. He's like, I still come to this bar, but I
Right.
don't agree with it.
You would believe it. We got
It
a
was
couple running loose.
it was a great representation of Daytona.
Where did the pit bull go?
The pit bull seemed to just go as he pleased, in and out of the bar. He came into the showroom a few times, and every time I'd be like, when you're bombing really hard, so anything that happens, you're like, maybe this will be.
Right.
So I kept going back to the pit bull, and the people were just like, we know the pit bull's here. He's always here. They never thought it was an interesting thing.
That's what's so horrible about audiences sometimes is that like when you do a show in another town where everybody or like a bar where everyone gets like the local references and like or like I don't even want to say local references because it's more specific than that. Like, as a comic, we'll drive through part of town, look at a street sign, okay, that's a shitty part of town. We'll bring that up. Got a Waffle House in that part of town. Whoa, everyone's cracking up. But like when you do these shows where there's these ultra nuanced specific things that only the audience knows, like a pit bull, they're just like, what is your problem? Can't you just do your act? It's like no one told me that, hey, sometimes a pit bull walks in, everybody's comfortable with it.
Yeah, and no one told me these people have been here so long and only here that
Right.
they won't even be able to put themselves in your place where you're like, is that the most dangerous type of dog off a leash? Is that not notable to anyone else?
Yeah.
And it was such a great. I should have known as soon as the pit bull got no reaction that I was like, oh, I'm a stranger in a strange land because there was no way I was relating to anybody after that.
Yeah, right. They're just like, you're an outsider and we don't want you here.
Yeah.
God, people are the worst.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. But at least it was a gig where I didn't mind not relating to that audience.
Yeah, if they're dying at like making fun of a blind person it's one thing to do blind jokes, but to do it as a blind guy is walking in the room, it's really, it's like something you'd see in The Office as like parody of what not to do.
Yeah, the fact that you spotted somebody who is blind is hilarious.
Right.
It's not a good rule of comedy usually.
And then to continue to like, make fun of them for their blindness. Like it's not the t-shirt they're wearing. I mean, really, it's hard to make fun of a blind person when they're in the audience for anything. But it's like, I feel like if someone came in a wheelchair, they were like, "Whoa!
Oh, look at wheels!" Yeah, it would be.
In,
That is exactly what would have happened. It was such a great. It was such a great, like, it almost kind of made me feel better. I do remember later that night, it's my birthday and I'm in the bath, this heart-shaped bathtub, and I'm eating like drive-through food.
Yes.
And I just remember being like, dude, I could have gone to grad school. I could be paying off student loans at a regular job right now, and I'd be so much happier. But looking back, I love that story, but at the time, yeah, that's probably the most depressed I've been.
Yeah, and like the bathtub really resonates with me because I've also been in a bathtub after a bad night of comedy, and you start to get why people kill themselves in
Oh, for
bathtubs.
sure. Yeah. Dude, if you can't see, like, you look at your just fat body in a mirror at a hotel and you've just bombed, you're like, I'm not getting anything out of this artistically. My body is falling apart because I'm like living in hotels and drive-throughs. And then you look in the future and you're like, where does this end? It doesn't end well.
Doesn't it? It
It's
just
a rough.
you really do feel like at that moment you're like, the only way this is going to end is for me to end it. And
Yeah.
sometimes for people that is quite, they take that very literally, you know.
Yeah.
And not to get too dark, but when people are like, did you hear that comic killed himself, like, can you believe it? They you know, like, they were so funny, they seem so happy. It's like, can I believe it? Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm shocked more people in our business aren't, because it's just that. It's that every, not every night, but it happens a lot.
It never stops happening.
Oh my God. So
It's
did you
not
just
like a
stay one
band.
night? Were you just one night in Daytona?
I had, yeah, so one night in Orlando, one night in Daytona, and then I think I did like a room in Columbus, Georgia on the way back to Nashville. And it was a whole run of just like, it was all those classic shows of they don't give you any information. In the email, the information they give you is bad. Like, you'll get to a show and they're like, you got to be super clean. And then you get there and it's like the host is yelling slurs up top.
Right.
Like, whatever, just a nightmare of a show. But yeah, I did a lot of those just gigs where it's like, if you'll pay me to do stand up in due time, I'm happy to take it no matter the details. And you run into like a lot of just horrific shows.
Of course, because when you're starting out, you don't have anything else. Like, you
No.
don't, and you also have no barometer of like, this probably won't be well. Like, you're
No,
like,
and there's that masochism thing where you're like, I need to take every gig, even when people are warning me, don't take that gig. You're like, I'm taking all of them.
right. And there's also a feeling of like, well, maybe it'll be okay. Like, maybe it won't be as bad.
Yeah.
And then it's worse.
It's always the worst. But at least with those shows, you get out of town and you're like, I'm not going to see any of those people ever again, except maybe on the news. Like, none of this matters. It's a lot worse. I feel like it's still a little worse if you have a bomb and then you got 7 more shows at that club and you got to see the staff and the whole
Right.
thing.
Oh my God. There is nothing worse than like when you're at a club for a weekend and it's like where you can't find your like rhythm all weekend and you're just like, I have to prove to somebody in this building that I'm funny. Like, and then you're on like the Sunday show and you're like, is this really where I'm going to try to make my stand? Sunday at 7:00.
The least ideal circumstances, you're like, this is where I get. It's also that horrific thing of like, with stand up, if you suck, nobody knows you don't suck all the time.
Right.
They're like, this is, you get one shot. And if you suck, I'm going to think you always suck.
Yeah.
I'm never going to check.
That is a great point.
It's a horrific.
No check-in. There's no like, how's he doing in 6 months? It's just, or just poke your head. Like, you almost want to tell people like, that's not every night. Like,
I always want to tell people that.
Yeah,
I want to go, that's not.
That's not normal. I know you have. All right, I want to hear one more story, and then I have a story, a shared experience with you.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear. All right, my other story that I really enjoyed was so I was pretty early on, and a comic who is a great guy, I love him, but he brought me to do a gig, and he's always just like, be there at whatever time, have X amount of time ready. He's not like, no information ever. So we go to do this gig right outside of Atlanta. I love Atlanta. It's awesome. A lot of my friends live there after college. So I post about it. I'm like, I'm going to be doing this show, this headliner. It's going to be great. And I get all these people being like, can we come? Can we come? I was like, all right. So they all come to the show. There's like 15 people from high school.
And you're like, this is that feeling of like, they're about to find out what I'm all about. Like, they are going to know that, like, even though I was quiet in high school, like, I'm going to get them.
And this is going to justify me living in a duplex when they're getting a house. Like, this is going to justify all the sacrifices that you like are like, this is why comedy's cool, because they're going to see me. It's going to be crazy. Right. So I get there, and I'm feeling like really good about my act. I remember I was like riding a real string of good gigs. And we get there, and it's like way too fancy. It's in a brewery with those roofs that are like 700 feet up, so like the sound just is all over.
Right.
And there's people in like evening gowns. It's a lot of middle-aged couples in like evening gowns and then ties and blazers. And I'm like, all right. And I can see my friends from high school because they're all just dressed like regular mid-20 people.
Of course.
And I get in there, and the guy it's a fundraiser. So already I'm like, this is bad. And it's for domestic violence victims.
Good.
We're raising money to pay for, so I'm like, okay, I mean, this is a great cause. And as long as we don't, as long as we don't bring this up before the show, it'll be fine.
Just
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all gonna be fine. It's all gonna be, we're gonna make it. So I get up to go, and they're like, we're about to start. And I think I'm hosting. So I'm going to walk up, and this guy stops me. It was like a movie. He like put his hand on my chest as I was walking to the thing. And he goes, hold on. And he goes up, and he's like, all right, guys, we're here for whatever organization. We just want to show a quick video. And as soon as he said video, I was like, oh no. So projector screen comes down. They start playing the video, and it's like every cliche of like the silhouette of a shadowed hand on a wall, and then people with black eyes being interviewed. I mean, it's the darkest thing I've ever seen. And the video rolls back up. There are people openly like weeping, and the guy comes up and he's like, so you can see why it's so important that we raise money for this. All right, guys, who's ready to laugh? Like literally, that was no transition. Who's ready to laugh? Claps, and then he starts reading my credit.
Oh my God!
He's like, this guy's a regular. I was like, please don't do that. So I go, it's so quiet. Some of my friends are clapping, but like they're just like, what is happening?
Right.
I go up, and at the time, all of my jokes are just essentially like, dating is weird, huh?
Oh.
So I'm just doing jokes about, when I was living on a sailboat dating people and how creepy that was. I mean, every topic you don't want to hit when the domestic violence thing is just looming above everything.
It's like the projector's still rolling up.
They put it on mute, and it's just like playing over me.
You like rolling up. Some woman is crying on mute. Yes.
And if you listen back to the audio, I'm bombing so hard, except for one laugh in the back of the room that's just laughing so hard, and it's my buddy who's the headliner. He's laughing so hard at just what a nightmare this is that the joke will bomb. It'll go past that period of time where you expect to laugh, and you'll just hear this evil cackle in the back. So I bombed for like, 30 minutes, and then I get off and I go see my friends. And they're all just doing that thing of trying not to be like, man, you bombed.
Right.
And then one girl I remember I had a huge crush on in high school. She was like, I love that and you could see her trying to struggle to say something nice. And she goes, getting involved with good causes. And I was like, okay, well, this is probably as low as it's going to get for me.
You're just like, hey, we don't have to say anything.
Hey, if I could just walk into a river right now, that'd be great. I don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's like, why don't we just call tonight a wash? Like, you guys go out, and I'll obviously not follow you. And
let me get you a drink, and then you just go on your way.
God, that is insane. The amount of times I did a contest once, which, as you know, comedy contests are usually set up very well.
Of course.
And I did a contest once, and I wasn't first, but the guy that was first, the host was like, I'm going to go up and do a couple minutes, then I'll bring you up. And he's like, all right. And the host goes up, and he does like 2 minutes of material, and then he's like, I want to make a quick announcement. We have a special guest here tonight. A few months ago, we lost a comedian in a violent act. He was killed. His sister and his parents are right here, right now. Let's have a moment of silence for him. Moment of silence. And he's like, all right, so your first contestant coming up here. Wish him luck. And I was like, oh my God. And people don't even, they're just like, all right. That's how it's happening.
Yeah, people have no concept of all the factors that need to go into like making it comfortable. They think it's like ambient music or jazz. They can just turn you on,
Right.
and it's like no, I need some setup. I had a guy do a moment of silence at a show once, and the best part about it is like they never need to because anyone who thinks that's a good idea is going to result in a silent crowd anyway. Like you don't
Yes.
even have to ask. It's going to be a
Right.
nightmare. It's rough. I also there's so much undermining when you're trying to do comedy. Like I did a club once and I'm hosting, and before the weekend they tell me someone's being rowdy, you can kick them out. And this guy to this late Friday show, he lights a napkin on fire, like with a lighter. There's not candles on the table. And so I see the fire and I'm like, what was that? And he's like, just completely nonverbal drunk. And he keeps yelling. I was like, all right, I think we got to get this guy out of here. And I'm expecting security to come get him or something. And
Right.
from the back of the room, I just hear someone go, "Nah, he's a good dude." And it was the manager. So he just let him stay. And the rest of the weekend, the rest of the show, I just have no authority. No one's listening. It's over.
When the club doesn't have your back, it really is like, oh, I'm completely alone. Like
Yeah.
you already feel alone enough in another city by yourself, but you kind of feel like, hey, when you come to the club, it's like we're work friends for
We're a
the next
team.
couple nights. We're a team. And then when you find out that they have abandoned you, you're just like, okay.
Yeah, it felt like I was getting heckled by the manager because he doesn't say anything. He just yells out, "No, he's a good dude." And I
Oh,
was like, okay, well,
that is horrible.
yeah.
That is what makes people like you said, that's what makes people think like comedy's bad. You suck and comedy is bad because they are there that one night. Like,
Yeah.
why would we ever do that again?
Yeah. It's
They
horribly uncomfortable. It's like no. Sometimes you just want to be like, did anyone think about this show before, like 30 seconds before it started?
right.
And it
Yeah.
feels like no.
Some places they're just like, oh, remember we're doing comedy tonight. Are there people here? Yeah, there's like 100 of them outside. So
Yeah, there's a lot of I don't know how much. I'm sure this is everywhere, but especially in like the South, there's a lot of like ambush comedy. Like people
yes,
are at a brewery on like a date, and then they just cut the lights, turn on a spotlight, and you're just going.
right.
And you're like, they're on a first date. They can't just sit silently listening to this. It's going to be a nightmare.
And this show wasn't advertised for a reason because if it
Yeah.
was, no one would be here. I used to run. Well, I was doing the open mic and then I ran the open mic for a little bit where we were downstairs in the bar in front of a cooler and we were such a bothersome to the patrons that they eventually moved us upstairs into the private room, which was much nicer, but nobody would come up there. So the open mic just became only comics. And it was like we annoyed them so much that they just finally said, you know what? You can have your own space. Like you don't get to bother anybody anymore. You're upstairs by yourselves.
Yeah, we're not going to put the customers through this entertainment that theoretically we got for the customers.
Yeah, and I remember like we would be loud enough where people would come up and see what's going on, and they would like come up the stairs, look, and turn around and walk right back down the stairs. They were just like, no,
Yeah.
I thought it was karaoke, and it's not.
There's nothing better than when people see comedy and they go like, "Oh no," and they just leave. We had a guy. So just super quick, but I was in Toronto. That's where I started doing stand up, and there used to be this club that was above, like it was like an open mic, and it was above like a sex place, like a sex shop that also
Yeah.
had like events. And this one time, this guy came in, and he's wearing. I guess they did other events different nights of the week, and he got the nights mixed up. But he walks into the room and he's wearing full on like latex, like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction without the mask.
So he's like ready
And
to go.
he's ready to like really have a night. And he walks in and just people, some guys just bombing on stage, and there's like 3 people in the audience. And the guy's like, "Oh, it's comedy night." And the guy in the latex goes, "Oh, yeah, I know." And he he sits down. He watches one guy bomb for 5 minutes, and then he stands up and he like I guess he felt the need to address people. He stands up and he goes, "All right, guys, that was great," and then he leaves. So he played it off as like, "No, I just came to watch 5 minutes of comedy in a gimp suit."
Yeah, he's like, I was scuba diving. I just came from the river.
I love that he said, all right, guys, keep it up. Like he's a scout or a,
All
industry
right,
guy.
I'm gonna get out of here, but you guys keep on keeping on.
I like what I see, guys. I see a lot of sick stuff, and this is the best, So keep it up.
This is pretty sad. So there's an experience that you and I shared, and we don't have to say the name of the place. It is in Nashville or the comic involved, but it was like, you'll know as soon as I say, obviously. But and it wasn't, the gig itself ended up being good, so it's not necessarily a hell gig, but it was a hell moment, and a moment that I have never seen still or before.
I think I know where the story's going, but I want to hear you just lay it out.
So like, I'm like gonna be doing a show, 3 shows or whatever it was at the club, and I was like, this is great. I'm like headlining, my friends are on the show. I'm like I get basically a paid weekend with my friends in Nashville to do comedy. This is why we get into this business, right? So I made the mistake of really you learn these quickly, of giving out guest spots, and I gave out one to somebody who was very nice, funny. When I saw them the last time I was in Nashville, said, why don't you come down? Because when you get the opportunity to do that, you feel so cool. You feel so good being like, why don't you come? It's my night. Hey, you're getting in. I'll shave some time, whatever. And you're there, and Chance is there, and I'm there. That's the show. And Mike Merrifield, he was also on the show. And it was the 4 of us that were on the bill. And all right, it's going to be a good show. Well, the gentleman that I invited to do the guest spot, he does his time, and it's like a 6-minute spot, maybe even less, 5 minutes. He had a video camera and the bit that he ran was pretending to film a special during his 6-minute set, where, I mean, I remember, like, I don't know if I'm doing it justice. Like, he got on stage, he accosted, he was like, you should be louder, I'm filming a special.
Very aggressive up top.
Re-entered the stage, lights, music. He's like, you're holding the camera, and you're going to cheer, you're going to pretend to heckle me. Like, and, he's now at like 3 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, this crowd is becoming rowdier. They are completely taken out of the context of comedy. And I'm like there with you, and we're all kind of in disbelief, I feel like. So that's my side of it. When you saw this, was it something you saw before there?
Well, it was that great thing of, you and I met out of town, and then I live in Nashville. You came to Nashville to do some shows, and the first time, I think you saw the guy we're talking about. He had a great set, and it was one of those things where it's like, if somebody just has one of those magical nights where they do way better than usual, yes, and an out-of-town person sees them, that out-of-town person will leave and be like, it's great. And it's funny.
Just like the sucking. It's just
exactly. Yeah, you get one shot. Whatever that shot is, that's what's so horrifying and great about stand-up. You get one impression. So you come back, and I think we're heading to the show, and you tell me you gave him a guest spot, and I remember being like, okay, that's okay. Well, that's an interesting decision. But I was like, maybe it was fine. And he goes up. He essentially hijacks your show. I remember he's telling the sound people what he's going to do, and they're going, no. And he's going, we're doing it. So he goes up. He gives an audience member a camera, and he's like, you're filming this. Then I remember my favorite part was I think he's supposed to be just doing a guest spot. He has a different comic who's hosting do another fake intro for him. Yes. So he's like, he's on stage. He goes, you come back up here, do a fake intro. I want you guys all to go crazy, and I want you to start like screaming. He's basically just making the crowd uncontrollable.
Right.
And then he films it, and if I remember correctly, he films this fake thing that he's going to do something with online, and then he just goes, all right, good night. Like, no, didn't do a set.
Didn't do like any material. He just did like all crowd work, and then got off stage. And what was the most shocking was when he got off, we were all like, it would be like if someone pulled out a gun, and everyone's like, holy shit, there's a gun. And then that person with the gun was just like, so anyway, what were we talking about before
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no sense of I might have done something rude or weird. He just came out and was like, Friday night. Like, just no
Hey,
sense that he'd
they're
done
kind
anything.
of weird, huh? You know?
And they didn't really get into my fake. I always feel like it's like if there was a concert going on and there was a guest band and they just came out and tuned their guitar and like filmed a promo and it was like, all right, good night. It's like, why
Yeah.
did you?
Hey, man, it's like, I thought you were just going to tell some jokes.
No, this is a platform for me to do something that you won't get any benefit from. That's what I love. It's such a nice thing when somebody gives you a guest spot. And you're right, it feels so cool to give somebody a spot.
Yes.
And then to have someone just blatantly be like, ugh, just throw it in your face. I really did enjoy that.
It would be like if you left a nice tip at a restaurant and then they picked the tip up and threw it in the trash. They were just like, your money is worthless. And you're
Yeah,
like,
it was
and then you can't get it back. You're like, I
no.
can't get that back. I can't get that time back. I can't get that money back. You know?
And you also can't, if something, I mean, from what I remember, you had a good set that night, but let's say it had gone horribly sideways. You can't then come back and go, well, what went wrong was I gave this guy a guest set.
Right.
So it's all on you.
It's still on me, you know? And I remember thinking, like, this is the exact opposite of what should be happening, you know, like halfway into the show. Like, the crowd is warmed up. Let's ride that wave into the night and all get out of here feeling good. And instead, it was like, let's shut everything down and try to convince the crowd. And that is so true. He did have the host come up and do some like crazy intro. And it was
a fake intro with fake credits. That's my favorite part.
Because then my credits aren't as good as his fake credits.
Yeah, people are like, I guess we're just making up credits for everybody. Like we're just making this up. It was such a great, also the idea that a comic would be a guest on a show and be like, let's create kind of like an uncontrollable, rowdy vibe for the headliner.
Right.
It's such a great way to do it.
The only thing that could have been better is if he would have went up and did my material right before I did. Like if he would have, like if his 7 minutes were my first 7 minutes, and I was just like, I understand this is awkward, but
that'd be the greatest part. I always think how fun it would be to go up and if you know the person behind you's act, just touch on as many of their premises as you can. Just say them so that when they bring them back up, the crowd's like, didn't we just hear about this?
That's so funny. I know comics that have, without the other comic knowing, dressed the same, knowing they're going before them. So they go up dressed one, and then the comic that has to follow them looks like they copied their outfit, and then now they have to explain why they're dressed the same.
It's best.
Brilliant. It's brilliant. Well, wow. Where does the time go? What a night that was. Connor, please tell people where to find you and where to hear you.
You can find me at Connor Larsen, ConnorLarsen. Connor Larsen Comedy on Instagram, TikTok. I got a website. I'm back. I live in the South, luckily, so I am back doing shows this weekend. So if people want to come out to them, if you have a national audience, we'll be out there. And yeah, I'd love to meet any of the fans from Hell Gig. So that'd be great.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Blast. Yeah.